A century ago, a blinding beam of light descended from the heavens, striking the earth with absolute force, transforming the once vibrant blue cradle of existence into a vast, unforgiving desert. Survival forced the remaining humans to retreat into isolated fortresses. In this ruined landscape, a young man reflects on his miserable existence, acknowledging that he has lived a truly wretched life. He realizes that in this era, the weak possess wealth and status while he faces his end. Death approaches because he was simply too weak to endure. Looking out at the desolate world, the young man wonders why the destruction wasn't total, questioning why only the lowly bugs were permitted to remain alive. Inside the cramped confines of a mining bus, a hulking, tattooed man mocks a mistake, claiming his hand slipped with a sneer. He offers a hollow apology, demanding the youth's name to properly address him. The boy identifies himself only as Xian. This lack of family name triggers cruel laughter from the brute, who mocks the possibility of Xian having multiple fathers. As the bus rattles, the narrator notes that the passengers share a dark secret: none of them are actual minors. The tattooed man leans in, suggesting they should get along since they are in the same situation, before asking what crime led Xian here. These men are either desperate fugitives or hardened criminals. The brute guesses at Xian's past, listing assault, fraud, or theft as likely possibilities. Xian remains silent until he suddenly strikes, his fist connecting with the man's face. Standing over his opponent, Xian calls him a fool and reveals the truth: it was murder. In the towering, neon-lit shadows of Neo Soul, the definition of humanity is reserved only for the strong. Xian views his victim as nothing more than trash added to a dump, a thief who died trying to steal his belongings. However, he unknowingly killed a subordinate of Li Jiryong. If the strong are human, then the awakeners like Li Jiryong are gods. Having offended a deity, Xian fled as rumors of the awakeners' pursuit spread, eventually crawling onto this bus bound for the mines. The tattooed man recovers instantly, his hand clamping onto Xian's face with crushing force. He asks if Xian is finished with his outburst. Sudden sharp pain radiates through Xian's skull as he realizes something is terribly wrong. A massive impact rocks the vehicle, throwing the passengers into a chaotic heap. Cracking his knuckles, the brute explains that he is here for the exact same reason. He claims he could have treated Xian like a younger brother, but the boy crossed a line that cannot be ignored. Xian curses his luck. Frustrated that his attempt to escape one awakener led him directly into the path of another, the tattooed man's body begins to glow with a menacing aura, confirming his status as an awakener. The passengers scream in terror as the bus is suddenly hoisted into the air. Men scream at the driver to learn how to drive, but the man behind the wheel only mumbles incoherently. Blood streaks the tattooed man's face as he realizes the driver is dead. The dying man's final words reveal a terrifying truth: they were never heading to the mine, they are currently being consumed. A colossal sandworm breaches the surface, its massive maw creating a swirling vortex that swallows the bus whole. As the vehicle descends into the creature's gullet, Xian reflects on the cycle of his life. Whether in the city or facing an awakener, the outcome is always the same. In this world, the strong take what they want, and his death is just another inevitable consequence of that law. Acceptance settles over Xian as the sand fills the dark chamber. He attributes his demise solely to his own weakness, finding the predictability of his fate almost boring. While he could indulge in the fantasy of being stronger and surviving, he dismisses such thoughts as meaningless ramblings. The sand rises, burying his reaching hand until only silence remains. Deep beneath the dunes, Xian's eyes snap open, glowing with a sudden, fierce intensity. A primal scream tears from his throat as he fights against the crushing weight of the earth. Lightning-like energy ripples through his skeletal frame, illuminating the darkness. Above the surface, the sand shifts as something powerful begins to stir within the desert's depths. His pupils dilate, reflecting a new, burning resolve. Sweat and grime coat his skin, but the despair that once clouded his vision has vanished. A rhythmic thumping echoes like a drumbeat across the wasteland. Visions of a lost world flicker, the rusted remains of the Eiffel Tower half buried in sand and monolithic ruins piercing the clouds. The planet hangs in the void, surrounded by shattered debris, as a spark of light ignites within the center of a dark iris. A name resonates in the silence: Sandblaster. Swirling currents of grit and energy coalesce around Xian's arm, forming a localized cyclone. He strikes out at the beast that tried to claim him, a beam of concentrated power piercing through the sand. He declares his intent to survive in this damned world where everything has been reduced to dust. He swears it. Emerging from the wreckage, Xian stands tall against the backdrop of the desert. Blue markings stain his face and his eyes burn with an unnatural light. He repeats his vow to survive as he stares down the massive creature. The journey is only beginning, with more of his story set to unfold as he carves a path through the endless dunes. Xian stands amid swirling dust, a rhythmic thrumming vibrating through his core. He feels a pulsing sensation clearly, every single cell in his body surging with newfound energy. High above, a colossal, segmented creature looms, its maw dripping with fluid. Questioning if this is the moment of his awakening, Xian readies himself, inviting the monster to strike. Sudden impact jars the air as a powerful figure descends, striking Xian and dismissing him as a test subject who stands in the way. Xian gasps, reeling from the force while struggling to comprehend how this stranger closed the distance so rapidly. He collapses into the sand, his vision blurring as he wonders about the man's terrifying speed. The earth trembles as Zhang Yongbayam leaps, questioning the creature's height before declaring that being up so high is unsettling. With a massive blade, he cleaves through the sandworm, forcing it back down to the ground floor. Xian watches in disbelief, witnessing the ease with which the beast falls. This is the true power of an awakener. A blue-haired woman named Jisel suddenly appears at Xian's side, boasting that Zhang Yongbayam is their captain. Xian flinches, startled by her presence and the strength she possesses. As she grips him, a numbing cold spreads through his limb, causing his arm to freeze. The captain looks on, noting that a sandworm is hardly a tough opponent, while Jisel chirps her agreement. Jisel playfully wonders about Xian's grade and ability, calling for drumroll before her expression shifts to confusion. She announces to the captain that this boy is not an awakener at all. Xian cries out in agony as his arm is manipulated, unable to believe the claim. Jisel points out the undeniable truth: the boy lacks any visible rank insignia on his skin. The captain stares, processing the absence of a mark, while another man shouts about the approaching sunset. Jisel notes that Xian will surely perish if abandoned in the desert. Despite Xian's protest that she nearly tore his arm off, the captain commands them to toss the boy into the Dodge. He reasons that the stranger was likely seeking the mine regardless of his status. The heavy vehicle roars across the scorched landscape, the engine's vibration humming through the floorboards. Inside, a man rants about the dangers of the setting sun and the captain's habit of running off alone. Xian lies bound in the back, marveling at the smoothness of the ride despite his restraints. He focuses inward, watching as a small spiral of sand moves to his silent command. Xian ponders why the others could not perceive his rank insignia. He observes the faint lines on his skin, noting the color is not the blue of magic types or the red of martial types, but the exact hue of the desert itself. Knowledge of rare types exists, yet an ability to manipulate the very sand of the world is something entirely foreign to known history. Though his mark designates him as the lowest F rank, Xian feels a power within that mirrors the boundless expanse of the desert. A dark grin spreads across his face as he resolves to bide his time. He will endure and conceal this gift until it is fully mastered. The desert is not his limit, instead the entire world will serve as his stage. The jagged spires of the Mana Crystal Mine rise against the orange sky, a fortified checkpoint guarding the entrance. A guard barks at Xian to follow, threatening to silence him if he complains about his bonds. Nearby, the captain stands with Jisel, his eyes fixed on a dark, mysterious hole in the distance. He remains unsettled by the boy's solitary survival, sensing something beyond mere coincidence. As the group moves deeper into the industrial complex, the captain's thoughts linger on the captive. He regrets the missed opportunity to learn the boy's name, gripped by a premonition that their paths are destined to cross again. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows over the mine as the weight of the future settles over the scorched earth. Xian stands before the sprawling underground expanse, realizing the mine is far more than a simple network of tunnels. It contains an entire civilization, suggesting that people actually live within these depths. A red-haired guard snarls at him to shut up, ordering him to keep his mouth closed and wait quietly for the supervisor. When Xian questions if he is being left there alone, the man threatens to put a bullet in his head before departing. Xian questions how the guard can be certain he won't cause trouble, but the man dismisses the threat, claiming Xian couldn't do anything anyway. In this third chapter of his journey through the scorched desert, Xian calls the man an asshole under his breath and decides to look around. Hunger gnaws at him, forcing him to seek out a place to eat until something catches his eye. Approaching a food stall, Xian attempts to get the vendor's attention. A propaganda poster nearby declares that through labor, the people will brightly illuminate Neo Soul. The old vendor mocks the grandiosity of the slogan, asking if it sounds grand. When Xian asks if mana crystals are the city's energy source, the man laughs at the inaccuracy, calling the idea funny. He points a finger at Xian, claiming that rats like him are the true energy source. He explains that they do as they are told and replenish their own numbers, making them the perfect fuel for the city. Xian remarks on how much the stranger knows despite their brief meeting. The old man retorts that at his age, with peers already taking a swim in the afterlife, one tends to take an interest in everything. He leans forward, asking if the interior of the sandworm felt like returning to a mother's womb. Surprise grips Xian as he realizes that specific rumor has already spread. The old man calls him a foolish kid, warning that he will soon wish he had simply ended up as sandworm waste. This place is no safe haven to run away to, yet Xian maintains he came only to make money. The man scoffs at the claim, calling it bullshit before offering to show him something interesting. He points toward the shelves, instructing Xian to look over at the collection. When Xian asks how trash could be interesting or if the man is going senile, the vendor explains these are items he has collected one by one over the years. With a chuckle, he reveals these are the final remains of the fools who came here, and Xian's own future. The old man describes how newcomers desperately sell everything to avoid entering the crystal mine. They sell their possessions and even themselves, yet they only delay the inevitable. Time slips away until they meet the same fate, eventually choosing to be swallowed by the mine because it feels easier. He concludes that while some leave a name behind, trash leaves nothing but more trash in death. Looking at Xian with anticipation, the old man asks what kind of trash he will leave behind. Xian ignores the jab and asks for the price of the food. The demand of 10 sol leaves Xian stunned, prompting him to ask if the meat was sprinkled with gold. The vendor argues that everything here is precious, claiming the discarded skewer alone is worth 9 sol. Xian laughs, suggesting the meat must be incredibly cheap if that is the case. He admits he lacks that kind of money and accuses the man of a blatant rip-off. He insists there is no way he is paying that amount. The old man asks if Xian found it strange that he could run a business so openly in a place like this. He leans in, demanding to know what Xian will do now. Panicking, Xian tries to calm him down, insisting he doesn't have the funds. He shouts that the price for the meat is absolute bullshit and begs to settle the matter with words instead of violence. The vendor smiles, claiming he is not cold-hearted and is willing to trade for something else. He specifies that the mana crystal in Xian's pocket will suffice. Shocked that even this rumor has spread, Xian reels from the demand. The old man orders him to hand it over, promising to make an exception and appraise it fairly. Xian curses the situation, thinking of the hardships and the things he went through just to protect the gem. He desperately asks if there is any other way to settle the debt, suggesting store credit as a possible alternative. A massive thug loses patience, asking the old man why he is still listening to the brat. He suggests burying Xian immediately. Suddenly, a sand blaster erupts and blood sprays across the scene. Xian hears a voice calling out to him, urging him to wake up. Xian snaps back to reality as a large man grips his head. The man asks if he is all right, noting that he has been spacing out as if having a bad dream. Xian curses under his breath. Realizing the intensity of his own thoughts, Xian tosses the mana crystal onto the counter, yielding to the demand. The old man appraises the large stone, suggesting it is worth 100 sol. Xian reacts with fury, demanding at least 300 for a gem of that size. The old man remains unmoved, repeating that everything here is precious and suggesting Xian should have stayed inside the sandworm. Rage boils within Xian as he curses the men, thinking that if he truly put his mind to it, he could take the old man down. He repeats the thought like a mantra, telling himself it is not yet the time. Forcing a smile, he tells the old man to ensure he provides plenty of change. Clexi agrees, warning him to be careful with where he keeps his money since pickpockets and robbers are everywhere. Xian retorts that a thief stands directly in front of him. Claiming generosity for their first deal, the old man tells Xian to pick any item he wants from the shelves as his change. Xian sifts through the shelves, dismissing the collection as a complete dump. The old man watches with amusement, noting Xian's obsession with never taking a loss. He sees a petty vitality in the boy that he hasn't encountered in a long time. Xian finally spots something and asks what it is. The man identifies it as an item left behind by a caravan. Xian decides to take the hourglass, doubting he will find anything better. The old man remarks that Xian takes an interest in useless things. As Xian prepares to leave, he asks for the man's name. The vendor identifies himself as Old Man Clexi. Xian tells Clexi that they should never cross paths again. Clexi chuckles, suggesting they will see about that. Later, in the dim light of the miners' quarters, Xian sits alone. He watches the hourglass, noting that only 10 minutes remain until it all falls. He prepares himself for what is to come. A rhythmic cycle of breath fills the silence as Xian focuses on inhaling and exhaling deeply. He stares at the hourglass as the sand runs low. With a final command to himself, he prepares to move. Xian sits on the floor of a dim room, teeth gritted in frustration. He clicks his tongue, realizing the item he found had nothing to do with his awakening. Despite the disappointment, a haunting sense of déjà vu lingers in his mind. The object felt familiar, as if it were calling to him specifically, yet it remained entirely alien. His contemplation shatters as a heavy boot slam against the door. A rough voice bellows from the threshold, demanding to know if he is the new piece of trash that arrived today. The intruder, a massive man with wild hair, screams at Xian to get moving toward the mine. He identifies himself as Back Manhwa, roaring that he shouldn't have to come all this way to collect a lazy worker. Xian stands his ground, retorting that his name is Xian, not a bastard, and points out that no one provided directions. His defiance is cut short as a massive fist clenches, signaling a violent end to the conversation. Violence erupts as Back Manhwa strikes, demanding Xian shut his mouth. He bellows about the audacity of an unawakened person talking back to him. Blows rain down, forcing Xian into the dirt while Back Manhwa asks if he looks like a pushover. He sneers that someone like Xian needs to learn their place and take their beating in silence. Eventually, the brute relents, ordering the battered young man to get up and follow him immediately. Wiping blood from his face, Xian glares at the man's back, silently vowing to kill Back Manhwa for this humiliation. They reach the Sector 3 mine entrance, a dark maw supported by rotting timbers. A nervous worker greets Back Manhwa, who demands equipment for the new recruit. The worker explains that the cost of tools and food comes directly out of Xian's daily wages. When Xian asks about the actual amount of the pay, he receives only more hostility. Back Manhwa mocks Xian's intelligence, asking if he needs a lesson on how to use a pickaxe. He reminds the boy that even the helmet is a debt against his wages. The brute orders the guide to take Xian to Tunnel 972. The guide hesitates, noting that the tunnel is dangerous, but a roar from Back Manhwa silences any protest. Xian retorts with a mocking farewell, prompting one last threat from the enraged foreman. As they descend into the earth, the guide explains Xian's misfortune, noting that Back Manhwa lost everything gambling today. He describes the mine as a den of vice, filled with drugs and prostitution, much like Neo Soul. Xian remarks that business must be good with idiots like Back Manhwa around. The guide warns him that he won't have to worry about injuries in Tunnel 972 because no one has ever returned from it with a single scratch. They arrive at the iron gate of Tunnel 972. Xian assumes it is a simple matter of mining monocrystals and returning, but the guide stops him. With a somber tone, the man reveals that Xian will not be coming back. Over a dozen people have already vanished into the darkness of this specific shaft. The guide offers a hollow apology and thanks Xian for entering the one place everyone else fears to tread. Panic flares as the lift rises, leaving Xian trapped in the abyss. He screams after the departing worker, cursing the bastards who sent him here just because of a bad mood. In a fit of desperate rage, he swings his pickaxe against the unyielding rock. The tool strikes with a deafening crack, the head snapping off and flying deep into the cavern. He cries out for it to come back, realizing he is now truly defenseless. Xian pursues the broken tool, venturing further into the oppressive dark. He notices the air thickening with mana, a density so high it would cause mana overload in any ordinary person. He wonders if the others simply couldn't feel the energy before they died. Finally, his boot hits the ground near the discarded metal. He laughs at his luck, finding the broken pickaxe even though the handle is ruined. As he reaches for the tool, something else catches the light. His eyes widen in shock as he discovers a strange object. He gasps, questioning if he is looking at a pitara. The item rolls across the uneven floor, glowing with an ominous light that reflects in his dilated pupils. The discovery halts his breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him in the silent tunnel. Memories of a harsh past flood his mind. He recalls the whispers of neighbors predicting his early death after his parents abandoned him. He sees himself as a child, bruised and desperate, stealing meat just to survive the night. Back then, his only wishes were to escape hunger and to have the simple luxury of a dream. He was a hunted animal running through the rain-slicked streets of a cold city. The visions turned darker, filled with the threats of men like Li Jijiong who promised to end his pathetic life. He remembers the terror of being hunted and the simple desire for a normal life free from the constant threat of death. Suddenly, the cold memories vanish, replaced by a suffocating heat. Xian stirs, his head throbbing with pain as he realizes the environment has changed into something muggy and unbearable. Grabbing a handful of the dark soil, Xian realizes it is actually ash. The truth settles in as he looks at his trembling hands. He concludes that falling through a portal has deposited him directly into the heart of a dungeon. The air is thick with smoke and the ground beneath him is scorched. He stands alone in a landscape of fire and ruin, far from the mines he once feared. The heat is agonizing, forcing a cry of pain from his parched throat. He realizes this isn't a dream. He is in a place that even the forces of Neo Soul would fear to enter. Volcanic ash coats everything like fire-scorched sand. He knows his lungs will fry if he lingers in the lowlands. Logic dictates that if there is an entrance, there must be an exit, likely located at the highest point of the terrain. Xian sets his sights on the distant mountain peak where lava flows like a river of gold. He pulls a cloth over his face to filter the ash, his resolve hardening. He declares himself Xian, the man who refuses to quit regardless of the odds. With a burst of speed, he dashes across the cracked earth, narrowly avoiding a collapse. He pushes forward, his spirit unyielding as he claims his path through the flames. Xian's desperate plea for mercy rings out as he claws at the scorched earth. Heat radiates from the flowing lava, but he refuses to succumb to fear. A guttural roar escapes him as he slams his fist down. Gasping for air, he realizes that his rage only intensifies the sweltering temperature. He forces himself to deactivate his anger, swearing to survive this ordeal. He directs his hatred toward Back Manhwa, promising a swift death for the man once he escapes this hell. Determination hardens in his eyes. He resolves to claw his way out and return at any cost. Calculating his movements, he notes that only 4 more jumps stand between him and safety. He commands himself to move rather than think, refusing to let his life end in such a desolate place. With a final vow to never stop, he lunges forward. A colossal reptilian maw erupts from the molten sea, its jagged teeth framing the tiny figure of the leaping man. The creature's scales shimmer with heat as it lunges, but the protagonist remains airborne, a speck against the vast, fiery predator. Lungs burning, Xian pants heavily as he questions the intensity of the heat. The volcanic ash melts away, confirming his suspicion that he can indeed manipulate the gray particles. Though the ability saved his life, the environment proves more vicious than any magic beast. The searing air roasts his nasal passages, making every breath a struggle. His mind begins to fade into a void as suffocation sets in. Thoughts of death cloud his consciousness. He finds it unfair to perish so soon after vowing to live, especially having never known the touch of a girlfriend. He offers a mental apology to Old Man Yama, stating that the man will have to settle for a crocodile bag instead of his life. A final, desperate cry escapes him as he collapses. A booming voice cuts through the haze, remarking on his amusing ability to manipulate sand. Startled, Xian wonders if the speaker is Old Man Yama. The voice continues to praise his talent as a figure descends. Xian looks up in shock to see an old man falling from the sky, defying the chaos of the dungeon. The stranger's hand grips a massive blade as he plunges toward the earth. His face is set in a manic grin, white hair whipping in the wind. Xian watches in terror, realizing something is coming. A pillar of blinding white light descends, striking the ground with absolute force. A massive shockwave tears through the cavern, throwing Xian backward. He clutches his head, the world falling silent as his eardrums rupture from the impact. Confusion reigns as he tries to process the identity of the old man and the fate of the monster that had been hunting him. The dust settles to reveal a figure standing amidst the flames. Xian realizes this man is no ordinary strong awakener. He exists on a completely different level. Clad in heavy armor and a tattered cloak, the stranger stands over the remains of the beast. He turns his glowing eyes toward Xian and demands to know what is happening. The old man looms over him, demanding a name. He begins a ruthless countdown, giving Xian only 3 seconds to respond. The pressure is heavy as the numbers drop. 3, 2, 1. Time expires before Xian can find his voice. The stranger barks at Xian, asking why he won't answer or if he is simply unable to speak. Xian struggles to hear through the ringing in his eyes, catching only fragments of the man's speech until his hearing finally returns. The old man prepares to strike, declaring that if the boy will not talk, he must die. Panic forces a scream from Xian's throat as he begs for his life. The old man pauses, noting that the boy isn't a mute after all. When asked again for his name, Xian shouts it out. The stranger Deoden scoffs at the name, calling it foolish. Xian bristles at the insult, wondering what kind of name the old man has to justify such mockery. Deoden introduces himself, leaving Xian bewildered by the man's erratic behavior. Xian demands to know what the man is talking about and why he is being threatened despite his gratitude for being saved. Deoden dismisses him with another insult, explaining that the boy has been caught in a snare. He describes the phenomenon of mana overload, where the dungeon creates a secondary entrance to expel energy, reeling in living creatures. He calls Xian's luck foul, noting that most people never see such a thing. Xian curses back Manhwa once more for his predicament. Deoden addresses the boy as a dumbass again, prompting an angry retort from Xian, ignoring the protest. The old man forces Xian to gather mana into his eyes. He instructs him to increase the purity of his mana and perceive the world through it. As Xian follows the orders, a hidden horror reveals itself, leaving him gasping in shock. Deoden observes with grim satisfaction, noting that the boy finally sees the truth. A massive, cloaked monster stands revealed, its presence previously undetected right under Xian's nose. He realizes that without Deoden's intervention, he would have been devoured without ever knowing he was prey. Gratitude washes over him as he recognizes that this man has saved his life twice. He asks for the man's identity once more, only to be called a complete dumbass. Deoden repeats his name, asserting his dominance over the brat. Xian's voice cracks with desperation as he demands to know the identity of the man before him and the nature of the power he wields. The stranger calmly explains they stand within a dungeon, a place that now serves as his personal hunting ground. When Xian repeats the term in disbelief, the man confirms it, challenging the youth to use his own eyes to witness the truth. He reveals himself as Crayon, a name that hits Xian with the force of a physical blow. The air in the cavern grows heavy as the revelation takes hold, leaving the young man gasping in sudden shock and confusion. Confusion grips Xian as the elder's inexplicable movements defy logic. A swarm of fiery avian shadows erupts, surrounding the young man and drawing a cry of alarm from his throat. The title of the Sandmancer of the scorched desert hangs in the air as the old man barks a harsh command. He calls Xian an idiot, telling him that if he possesses any worth at all, he must find a way to survive this trial on his own. Xian can only curse the madness of the man as the heat intensifies. Pain flares as the winged bastards strike with impossible speed. Xian snarls, unable to track their darting forms as they weave through the air like living embers. They are too fast to outrun, forcing him into a desperate defensive stance. Frustration boils over because the creatures seem to target his left side exclusively. A sharp hiss cuts through the air as the assault continues. Despite his efforts, neither his control over the sand nor his physical sight can keep pace with the relentless predators, leaving him bloodied and gasping. Realization strikes Xian that he will perish if he remains stagnant. The memory of the old man pulling him from the brink of death twice weighs heavily. To fail now would prove he is nothing more than a useless idiot. He commands his mind to think, to find a path through the onslaught, even as the old man continues to berate him for his perceived incompetence. The elder's voice provides a grim lesson, promising to show Xian exactly why he is an idiot. He commands the youth to gather mana within his eyes and focus with absolute intensity. The purity of the energy must rise, shifting the burden of sight from flesh to spirit. Xian attempts to imagine seeing through the mana itself, perceiving the presence of the monsters rather than watching for their shapes. A golden light ignites within his iris as he begins to track the flow of power in the darkness. Success depends on timing. When the monster's mana draws near, the counterattack must strike from the shortest possible distance. Realization strikes Xian that the old man might have orchestrated this entire ordeal to force this growth. Questions regarding the elder's true nature fill his mind as Crane's booming laughter reverberates through the cavern. The man is clearly enjoying the carnage, claiming it has been a long time since he was this fired up. He demands more from the abyss, his spirit rising in the heat of battle. Standing before a colossal, toothy maw that dwarfs the surrounding stone, the warrior remains undeterred. He bellows into the darkness, ordering the unseen forces to keep the challenges coming. The scale of the conflict reaches a peak as the massive creature looms, yet the man's thirst for combat only grows.